What is going on, everyone? My name is Jancy, aka You're the Collector, and I'm coming back to your screen with episode 1 of One World Under Doom. If you've been on my channel before, I did a video covering the One World Under Doom issue number 1. Not necessarily reviewing or going over everything that happened in the issue, but I broke down and covered every single little moment that led up to this, event that is going on in Marvel now. And because of the request from Matt from the Hobbs Geeks News podcast, and more specifically from my wife, I guess I'm now covering this event, or as much as I can anyway. So I thought, let me pick and choose from the 32 issues that are coming out for this event, and let me see which ones I would like to read, and if I like them and I think they're interesting, I'll cover them. So here we are. The actual part 1 for the event came out in a tie-in, and that was Fantastic Four number 28. So let's just jump right into it and see what happened there before the whole world knew that they were under Doom's control, basically. So here we go. It's been months since Dr. Doom became Sorcerer Supreme and disappeared. Mr. Fantastic has spent all that time trying to find a way to understand magic so he can find Doom and stop him. But he's failed. Reed Richards' grasp on magic is flimsy at best. But Sue Storm suggested there was another man who holds both a graduate degree in physics and an understanding of magic. Maybe he could facilitate this learning process for Reed. That man was Dane Whitman, the Black Knight. Reed and Sue decided to pay the Black Knight a visit, looking for any insights. Sue mentioned how the Black Knight's ebony blade was able to cut through her force fields during their wedding. I went looking for this moment myself so I could show it to you guys. I like doing my deep dives. I like to show the research. If something happened before and it's referenced, I want to see it myself and I want to show it to you guys. So the problem was there was no editor's note with the issue reference, and I should have taken that as a hint. Still, I did the research and I found the Fantastic Wedding took place in 1965 in the Fantastic Four Annual number 3. While everyone and their mama was fighting each other in this issue, you know who wasn't? The Black Knight and the Invisible Woman. So there was no scene of the Black Knight cutting Sue's force fields with his ebony blade. So I was like, maybe this happened somewhere else. But when I went back and read the whole page, Sue basically made that up to convince Reed to abandon his research to go talk to Whitman. Sue just Googled magic guy who knows science, and Whitman's name was the top result. So shout out to Ryan North, the writer, for sending me on a wild goose chase for no reason. That was amazing. The thing is, when Sue and Reed met with Whitman, they get a big surprise. Dane Whitman was sitting on the newly forged Siege, a throne made from the melted, and get this, ebony chalice, the ebony crown, and the ebony blade. Not to overstate the obvious, but number 1, those items are what make the Black Knight the Black Knight. And number 2, the entire reason they came all this way was because of the ebony blade. So now what? Whitman said the ebony siege granted him new abilities, like he could observe hidden truths and other times. We'll go back to that later. But Whitman offered his guests another solution, the option of using the faded blade. I never heard about this before. So what is this about, right? That was like my first question. The faded blade. There's another blade in the Marvel universe. Okay, feed me more, Ryan North. The faded blade was a magical blade that could slice through anything, including time. So if something were to be cut, let's say in the past, it would not be able to be fixed later in the future. It's like a permanent blade, basically. And I'm gonna be honest, that sounds like one hell of a weapon. The problem was the faded blade was created in the 1300s and it was lost around that time too. Just in case you're wondering, Dane Whitman is the most recent reincarnation of the Black Knight. So he possesses the knowledge from all previous Black Knights. That's how he knows about this mystery weapon from the 1300s. Just in case you were wondering, right? I'm not really gonna go into the lore of the Black Knight, but that's more or less how it works. Reed's frustration, however, was showing, and I get him, right? Mr. Fantastic, the smartest man in the world, has been struggling to reconcile how magic interacts with physics for at least 6 months, right? Just when he's all out of ideas, this guy Whitman tells him there's this weapon that can help solve all his problems, but the weapon is lost in time. Why would you even bring that up? What Reed needed was some way to understand magic and how it works, but Whitman was like, oh dude, that's super easy, barely an inconvenience. He wrote a formula, or rather an equation, on a piece of paper and handed it over. Reed took one look at the note and said, this is garbage, gibberish. You could tell he was starting to question Whitman's sanity. The Black Knight would not be discouraged from helping his friends, so he decided to show them instead of telling them. And using some green magic, hint hint, he time traveled with the couple to 1915, specifically to the front lines of World War I. But there was a catch. They didn't physically travel back to the past with the Black Knight. Instead, their consciousness came back in time and took possession of the bodies of people who were actually alive and present at this time and place. Why? What was the reason? Well, the faded blade. Of course, Whitman had it on good authority that the blade could be recovered here and at this time. At this point, this is where the genius writing of Ryan North shined the most. He excels on giving the Fantastic Four a challenge, specifically challenges that highlight the core of what the Fantastic Four stories are supposed to be: sci-fi and discovery. The challenge here is one of archaeology, which is, Sue's wheelhouse if you didn't know. They must piece together the location of where the faded sword was created according to the time period. By using what Sue called applied empathy, they can determine where the people of the 1300s would have built their cities, because no matter the time, people have the same basic needs, right? Shelter, water, food, etc. So it all becomes a problem of deduction. Eventually, they picked the location and they went digging until they actually found the faded blade. All they had to do was secure the weapon and return to the present to recover it. Sue even stated they should have just left it where they found it. That would be the easiest place to come back to now that they knew where it was. Whitman proposed they hid the weapon somewhere else, but the place he proposed was going to be destroyed in the war due to the bombings and whatnot. They had to assume that if they placed the blade in that location, the blade would also be destroyed. It didn't make any sense. That's when Sue and Reed started to question Whitman's true intentions. Out of nowhere, Whitman mentioned the equations he wrote down for them, but Reed said, what about the equations? Whitman's demeanor changed completely, and he said, they are nothing, and so are you, Richards. Hint, hint. That's when the Black Knight used that green magic again to push the couple out of those bodies they have borrowed. Before they could say out loud who they thought was behind the whole plot, Doom revealed himself in the most dramatic fashion you can imagine, because, let's face it, Doom was probably a drama kid, a theater kid, if you will. Dr. Doom, the Sorcerer Supreme, sent Reed and Sue to the astral plane. Regardless of their efforts to fight back, they were no match for Doom. So while they struggled, Doom proceeded to share his knowledge and reasons behind his entire scheme, aka he went into a villain's monologue. Basically, he was manipulating Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, to send them back in time so they could find the faded blade for him, because there are forces in the astral plane that were ready to oppose Doom as Sorcerer Supreme. So they forged the faded blade, but before he could destroy them and get his hands on the weapon, they hid it in the past. However, there were clues that all of this was a setup. For instance, the word fate was not used in Old English, specifically not in the 1300s. The word people used for fate back then was doom. People, like, how cool is this? How crazy is it? Ryan North is a genius. Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman were sent back in time to recover the Doom Blade. I mean, that sounds amazing. This is great stuff. I'm sorry. Doom finished by sharing a couple more details of his overall plan before he decided it was time for Reed and Sue to meet their maker. Victor Von Doom put a magical sphere around each one of them and proceeded to crush them inside. That's when he hit Sue. Those weird moments that Whitman was having could have possibly been Whitman struggling to break free from Doom's control. It was a long shot, but if there was something that Whitman was trying to tell them, it had to be in the equations he wrote down. So she shouted to Reed to go back to the equations with the hopes he could figure out what they meant. What could have been the secret message Whitman was trying to tell? Lo and behold, Reed put his entire focus on the gibberish that Whitman gave him. That's when he realized it wasn't an actual equation. It was words hidden inside all that gibberish. Magical words for a spell, to be more specific. All Reed had to do was say them in the exact order to cast the spell. It was a gift from Whitman. Mr. Fantastic casted the spell and they managed to escape by the skin of their teeth. It might not sound like a big deal. Oh, Mr. Fantastic used magic, blah, blah, blah. I know what you're thinking. But according to Sue, the fact that Reed used magic was a monumental milestone. They will need time in order for Reed to replicate those results, but that's the one thing they don't have anymore, because when they returned to Earth, Doom was already making his announcement to the world as its ruler, just like we already saw in the first issue of One World Under Doom. I don't know about you, but I think this is an excellent, part one, episode one, whatever you want to call it, for this event. I hope you come back for, part two. It's probably going to be the Thunderbolts story because I did read the previous run. With that being said, you have a blessed day. Thank you for watching, and remember to read more comics.